So we'll go into questions. I would like to hear also what you have to say or what you think about what was said here today. And I see that at least a couple of members of parliament. We can give, if anyone would like to raise their hands, we can start with the members of parliament and maybe go through some other questions. Daniel, you're free? No. Nothing to add. Okay. MEP Weimers. This is MEP-elect. He just got elected. He's a very good friend, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Mr. Prager, for great remarks. It's indeed refreshing to hear such an unapologetic conservatism being, being discussed in this House. It's quite rare, I'll tell you. But I would like to elaborate a little bit on hate speech, because it's codified law in Sweden, and historically it has been used to strike down upon anti-Semitism. Right now, what we see in the European Parliament is of course the same sort of efforts to try to widen the definition of hate speech into meaning practically everything that goes against the values of the left. And we've had, pastors being prosecuted in Sweden for, discussing the Bible and homosexuality. And you may like the content of that or not, but it's a fact. He was prosecuted. In the UK, they prosecute critics of the Quran and Islam. And while at the same time, I'm thinking, should we, as friends of Jewish life in Europe, should we do away with this tool in a time when, for instance, my home country, Sweden that is, see the aliyah of Jews? They can't live there anymore. I just visited Malmö. It's terrible. So it's quite an act of balance here. And what would be your advice to fellow conservatives in Europe struggling with this conflict of interests, if you will?
Look, I said that I believe that people who deny the Holocaust, who I consider as bad as the people who dropped the gas into the gas chambers, I believe they should have the right to do so. I see what has happened. It never stops with legitimate, true evil. The left will always use any opening to wreck. To wreck. That's it. I'll tell you why. This took me a lifetime to figure out. I figured it out 5 years ago in writing my Genesis commentary. God creates the world in 6 days. Forget 24-hour period. It's of no interest to me how long it took. But it's 6 days, because what are we going to say, 6 billion years, and you have the Sabbath every billion years? So obviously 6 days. Okay. But it's not, God didn't create for 6 days. God made order for 6 days. He also created. The left is a force of chaos. I studied the left. I was at the Russian Institute at Columbia University. I speak Russian. I studied Russian to read Pravda. And I went to the Soviet Union, as I said earlier, at a very young age, and I went a number of times again. I've studied the left my whole life. And I wrote a book on the left, on America, and on Islamic values. And I've studied it, and I realized if you ask a Jew, what book should I read to understand your beliefs? All right, here's the Bible, here's the Torah. Here's the Talmud, whatever. Christian, here's the New Testament. Here's the whole Bible. Fine. You ask a leftist, what book should I read to understand leftism? He has no answer. He's not going to say Das Kapital. First of all, you won't read it, because you will sleep within 2 or 3 pages. It is useless, and it is silly. So what will he give you? He doesn't have a book. And then I realized there's no book because there is no doctrine. Leftism is chaos. That's why they love change. The artwork in this building is chaos. That's all it is. It's not art. Watch Mr. Florzak's video on modern art at PragerU in 5 minutes. It's not art. This is The Emperor is Naked. It's garbage. It's chaos. It means nothing. I conduct orchestras as an avocation. I know the arts, and I really know music real well. Atonal music was chaos. That's all it was. It was chaos. It wasn't music. It was the use of musical instruments to make sounds, but not sounds that amounted to anything intellectually or passionately. It was useless, but it was chaos, and they love chaos. When Barack Obama's people won, you know what their motto was? We are the change we were waiting for. That doesn't mean anything. Do you understand that? It is a phrase that means nothing. Why do they love change? Not because change brings progress, because they love change. They're bored by the idea that men and women are men and women. It's chaos to say men are not men and women are not women. Chaos is what they aim. Chaos is the natural state of the world. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 2, and the earth was null and void. It was chaos. Chaos is the natural state. God makes order. On the second day, nothing is made. Light is separated from dark, and land from water. It's all order. They hate order. That's why the words law and order are to them neo-Nazi. They hate order. The idea that there are principles of beauty by which you measure Beethoven versus Stockhausen? No. You like Stockhausen, I like Beethoven. People call my show, hey, you like Shakespeare? Hey, I like Batman. End of issue. Right? There is no standards. As George Will, a major American conservative thinker, said on my radio show right before I left to Europe, he said, for the left, nothing is fixed. That's what it is. That's why, yes, there is a tension. Well, if these people could say, you know, Auschwitz was made up, it's a lie, then that's a horrible thing. It is a horrible thing. But next thing you won't be able to say, there's only one race, the human race. Or they're lumped, as you in Sweden know. Hey, a pastor says, I'm sorry, I love you, I honor you, you are created in God's image, but I can't marry you because my Bible says marriage is between a man and a woman. Sorry, you're a hater, you're lumped with Nazis. That's why, ultimately, except for shouting fire in a crowded theater, we have to be absolutists on free speech, because the left will destroy as soon as there is any opening. I'm sorry, that's what I believe. What would you like me to turn it off?
Yeah. Okay. I think the State Secretary had something to say quickly, and then we can take some more questions. Yeah.
Just a short sentence on that, because I cannot take myself back on things that Mr. Prager is saying. And first, thank you very much for the Hungarian example. It was a great honor. Nők, férfiak, a great story. And we are there to speak out things because we don't have anything to be afraid of. That's also important. Now, leftism is chaos. That's what you say. And I have a theory. It might be true, it might be not true. But the theory of mine is that why are the big so-called people's parties, most of all the Social Democrats, but also other parties, are in such a trouble and in such a crisis? I have a good explanation for that, because they have nothing to say. There is no content, real content in their politics. I mean, this is not a content to make propaganda for same-sex marriage. It's not a content. You cannot win elections with that. Or any other issue that is kind of like, how should I say that, seems to be popular, but in the content it has nothing to do with what is really important for the people. So that means that these parties are really empty and they have nothing to say. Most of all the Social Democrats. So that's why I wanted to. Leftism is chaos. That's in a certain sense completely true. And I do agree with that. We have if I may say, Mr. Prager, we have not the best opinion on liberal, on liberalism in Europe altogether, which is not a liberalism, but they call it liberalism. That's probably the problem. If it would be a real liberalism, then it would be okay. So we have this very nice debate on illiberal democracy that was spoken out by Prime Minister Orbán versus liberal democracy. And there is a council of the very wise people, 3 men, controlling the Hungarian Fidesz party if they are democratic enough. And one of the questions of these 3 men was, what does Orbán mean by illiberal? And he explains it very well. And the point is that left is chaos. They have nothing to believe in. And we have something to believe in. We have our fundamentals, Christian values or Judeo-Christian traditions, family. All these values are nationality. I'm not saying nationalism, but nationality. Proud Hungarians, proud Slovakians, proud Romanians, proud who else, whatever. It's important to be proud of your own nationality. I completely agree with you. So these are values, I think, and these are values that we would like to represent in the future as well, here in this building as well. Thank you. Sorry.
Folks, I'm going to take a 5-minute break. I'll be right back. Please don't leave because I have endless time. But give me 5 minutes. I'll be right back.
Johannes, you wanted to...
Yeah, thank you so much for the speech, a great speech. I must say, as ECPM and Salox, I think we have a bit more moderate view on the left, because there are also people, committed Christians on the left, and we have learned them to know them as such. But I think there is a clear distinction on a kind of totalitarian approach in which you basically cannot accept other points of view. And we sometimes see this happening on the liberal left, indeed. And on the other hand, I know personally a lot of people on the left who are simply very much committed to fight poverty, to fight inequality, to fight these things that generally conservatives actually agree with. When it comes to, well, actually we all want to fight poverty, we all want to fight inequality and so on. They have just a different approach. So personally, I think also in our organizations we would not make such a black and white distinction between the left and the right, but we would rather, I think, make a very clear distinction on unfreedom and freedom. And I think it's very good that Mr. Prager has the opportunity here to voice his points and to make his points, because that is what freedom in essence means, even though we may not agree with everything he said, or he probably will not agree with everything what we are saying. This is, I think, the most important point, that we fight for the freedom to be able to disagree. And I fully agree with those who are worried about the way sometimes that simply certain opinions are simply dismissed or pushed away simply because they are different from the mainstream. This is always something we have to be very much aware of, because, as I always said, if you, as Mr. Prager rightly said, if you start to say, well, this is not, you can't say that, and then what's the next thing you cannot say? We may differ on the degree in which you can enforce for certain points on law, whether there should be something as hate speech, but I think we all can agree on the fundamental principle of the freedom of speech and opinion. Thank you.
I think, Johannes and everyone, I think that's exactly the point. The point is about freedom, whether we want to keep freedom or not. And the point is which platform gives that freedom. because, as I said, the whole point of this conference is about freedom of speech, and it seems to be clear that one side wants that freedom of speech, even though it can also be offensive, because Dennis is a Jewish person, and obviously he had family that died in the Holocaust, and it's not a joy of his life to hear that the Holocaust didn't exist or so forth. It's not what he wants to hear, but he is willing to sacrifice that because he still believes that freedom is important. So I hope that makes sense. We are still waiting a few more minutes. Maybe shall we take questions, or maybe MEP Branislav, if you have something you want to say before we...
I see myself to make closing remarks, so I will wait.
Okay, so we'll take questions and then we can try because of the time. Yes.
So
Stella.
thank you very much. I have two
Would
questions.
you like to introduce yourself first?
My name is Stella Velica. I'm simply citizen, and I have studied physics and informatics, and I'm very interested in the freedom of religion. I would like to ask two questions for Mr. Prager, who is not here. I have a big problem with minorities that are the migration people which are bringing a lot of new values that he said, and the most of these values they are not compatible with our values in Europe, and it can be a big problem in the future. And my question is, how can we make these people, migrants with, I give only an example, the most they are Muslim, and how can we make these people to respect first our value, and after that to have their freedom of religion? What I'm thinking was, first is education, to teach in the school the Bible, Torah, and the Quran, and to interpret it, but obligatory this in every European school. And secondly is, how can we do on the European level? I believe in European institutions, so sorry, but I believe in that. And I only want to know, how can we do it on a European level to put these people to accept first our values and our civilization? And second question is, for Mr. Prager, is coming back, is how you will see the relationship between Russia, Europe, and US, because in Russia you have no freedom, and Russia is, my opinion, very interested to destroy the European civilization. I am sorry to say that, but I see not people, the Russian people, I said the government.
Okay, so I will take a few more questions.
Should I say anything on that?
Yes, of course, just take a few more, yes?
Thank you. My name is Rudy Roth, I'm an investigative reporter. I have a couple of very short questions, but first a little statement for Mr. From Hungary. I will not try to pronounce your name, sorry, because people say a lot about anti-Semitism in Hungary and Poland. Well, there's one example. In Wrocław, in Poland, in 2015, somebody burned a Jewish effigy, a puppet. He was condemned twice, in appeal as well. In Antwerp, in June 2002, the same thing happened by a group of leftists, NGOs, a Muslim group. Even Oxfam was in the organization of that group. Nothing happened. You know who was the Prime Minister in Belgium at that moment? Mr. Guy Verhofstadt. Okay, well known. Yes, okay. So just this remark, when Mr. Verhofstadt will teach you a lesson, remind him of what happened in 2002 in Belgium. Questions for Mr. Prager. How would you see, because you talked about Holocaust denial, and in Belgium we have this very specific, it's against rightist, but when leftists or Muslims do Holocaust denial, there's nothing. Even some people of the Ligue des Droits de l'Homme, I will set his name, Jean-Marie Dermagne, he gets conspiracy theories around that there are only few central banks and not in the hands of the Rothschilds. So leftist and Muslim, Holocaust denial, nothing. So there may be a good interest for you. And the second question about this one is, how would you accept that in this house, when Mahmoud Abbas comes given a speech and says conspiracy theory that Jewish rabbis called to poison Arabs, what was wrong? And he was applauded by the whole parliament who was present there. Abbas himself apologized later, but nobody in the parliament gave any damn to that. Thank you. What your opinion is on that one?
We'll take one more question over there, and then we can give the time to the speaker. Can I also say that, I'm so sorry, I didn't catch your name, but can I just say that we also had the president of Israel here when he spoke, and the whole parliament also applauded for him. I'm not sure if it was the whole parliament that applauded for Mahmoud Abbas. I think people are free to come and speak, and obviously some people agree with some and some people agree with others. But yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity. So my question is to Mr. Prager. First, I'm a huge fan, but I would like to challenge you a little bit. I am a nuclear engineer, but when I encounter an other nuclear engineer, I say I'm from Greenpeace just for the, let's say, the beauty of the debate, so please believe in the benevolence of the question. So first, you say the bigger the government, the smaller the people. Isn't it the lower the government, the good governance, the lower the people? Because, for example, in Scandinavian countries where let's say the government is quite predominant, you have a high rate of happiness in it. But you have a good governance. For example, there is a politician that has to resign because she bought a tablet of chocolate, of Toblerone, with the card of the party, and she has to resign from it to make public excuses. So that's the first thing. Isn't it the root cause of, let's say, less freedom of the people?
Yes, sorry, yes. Okay, I just wanted to give 1 minute to Rabbi Margolin because he didn't have the chance to speak, and then
Mr. Prager, I think many Europeans will find it a bit tough to analyze what you just said today. But at the same time, I think that the buildings that hosted so many, unfortunately, people who support terror cannot boycott you to speak at this parliament. If I understood correct, you're not a big fan of the left, right? Is that correct, what you just said?
Not a big fan.
I still truly believe that we have to judge people by their action and not by the way they define themselves. This is our mission, is to bring the good values and everything that, as a believer, I don't know if you realize, but I'm a believer Jew. And as a believer, we know that whatever exists in this world is what created by God. So the left is also created by God. There is a great reason for this. because they could bring many, many good and positive values. And this is our mission, to try to bring the values, the positive values, one by one, because light have a great nature, that it pushes away darkness. So I truly believe that there's no other way to push darkness but by illuminate more and more light and positive values. Thank you.
Well, I'll begin with the last. It's an interesting philosophical question. Did God make the left? I don't know. I'm not comparing them to Nazis. Did God make the Nazis? Is there something to be learned from them? There is no one, even Nazis, everyone has done some good. A lot of times people argue with me, well, do you not acknowledge the left has done some good? I don't know who hasn't done any good. It is not possible to have a movement that does no good. So I can only speak for me, Rabbi. I assess people and movements not by the question, did it do any good, but did it do more good than bad? All of us are on a scale. I've done some bad in my life, but I hope that I've done a lot more good than bad. I think the left has done a lot more bad than good. So I want to, I wouldn't be devoting my life to a Bible commentary if I wasn't trying to bring light into darkness. So I just wanted to just comment on that. What country are you from, if I may ask? You sir, yeah. From where? Belgium. Oh, from Belgium, okay.
French-speaking Belgium.
Yes, je sais. So what I caught in your question, you mentioned that the bigger government seems to correlate with higher degrees of happiness.
No, this particular case in the Scandinavian countries, if you have the ranking of the countries where you have the most happiness, you have Finland, Norway, Sweden, things like that, top 5. And those countries actually have big governments.
Right, okay. So the countries that are rated with the greatest happiness, like Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, seem to have larger governments. Right, so I did hear you correctly, good. So I wrote a book on happiness, so you're really asking me a subject that I've given a great deal of thought to. What if I said to you, I'm not saying this, but what if I said to you, gee, isn't that interesting? Norway, Denmark, Finland, Sweden are almost 100% racially, ethnically, religiously homogeneous. Maybe that's why they're happy. You wouldn't like that argument, would you? Because it sounds racist. But by the way, it has nothing to do with being racist. Are the Japanese happy? They're not white. They're completely homogeneous. By the way, that's why there's almost no crime in Japan, because it's completely racially homogeneous. People tend not to kill their own, except in civil wars. So it's a challenge to have multicultural, multi-ethnic, so on, like in America. And we had an answer, e pluribus unum. One of the 3 mottos of America was out of many one. So we don't care if you're black, we don't care if you came from Sweden, or if you came from Italy, or if you came from Japan, now become an American, which is what, by the way, I advocate in Belgium. I don't care where you came from, but become Belgian. I don't care where you came from, become German. That's why I wrote a book advocating these values. So I don't know that the reason for their happiness is larger government. There's a very powerful government in Russia, and Russians are very unhappy. That's why they drink so much. And by the way, Scandinavians drink a lot too, and I'm not sure how happy they are. I think it's a very interesting question. I don't know how you measure happiness, so I don't accept any of those statistics. What are people going to say when you ask them? Yes, frankly, I'm miserable. Most people will say I'm happy or whatever, and I don't know what criteria they use. I've been to those countries many times. with all respect, truly respect to your Swedish colleague there, Swedes are not known for being particularly happy. They, from a non-Swede, I had a friend who studied in Sweden the year I was studying in England, and it made a big impact upon me, things that he would report. And I have nothing against Sweden. I have nothing against any country, frankly. But I don't know how happy Swedes are. I think it's a very fair question. So this notion that it's the government, but not necessarily homogeneity, I just don't know. I just read a wonderful book by an Englishman who lives in Denmark. And he says it's quite overrated how happy everybody is in these countries. And by the way, even happiness is complex, because what if you're happy without freedom? What if you're taken care of completely, but you don't care about liberty? I'd rather be less happy and have more liberty than more happy and less liberty. That's very American of me, I admit, but I think it's a good thing. So it's a fair question and a good one. As to the women-man question, I guess that was in reaction to my statement about in Norway telling boards of directors that they had to have 50% women. Yeah. Again, it's a liberty question. You should be free. People should be free, period. Will they use their freedom to do wrong things? Are there anti-women bigots on some boards? Yes. Most companies, however, want to make money more than they hate women. That's between the two. How much do I want to suppress women and how much money do I want to make? Most people want to make money more than they want to suppress women. That's why in America, when we hear this argument, oh, women make 87 cents to the dollar that men make, there's such an obvious question. Then why hire any men? You're a fool if you can get the exact same work from women. You will save 13% just by only hiring women. So I'm skeptical of these things. And yes, freedom comes with a price. Benjamin Franklin, one of the founders of the United States, was said to a woman who asked about, will America survive? And he said something to the effect, it is a republic if you can keep it. And Washington and all the founders said, we will only have a free country if people have good values. Freedom is dependent, that's why freedom was dependent on, in America, on people being based on the Judeo-Christian value system. That was the notion. You can only be free if you have good values. You have to get your good values from somewhere. It doesn't come from the human. By the way, one final word from me on this, unless I'm happy to take any more. But here is the great dividing question. It has nothing to do with God. Do you believe people are basically good? Religious, Judeo-Christian value says no. Conservatives say no. The more left you get, the more they say yes. You can watch on YouTube. I debated two left-wing Berkeley students at the University of California, Berkeley. And I said, this is the best way I could make any approach, keeping much of what you said in mind. Let me just talk to left-wing students. I won't give a speech. So my final question to them was, do you believe people are basically good? And of course they said yes. And I said, well, that's the difference. To believe people are basically good, maybe Europeans believe it less because your continent has been filled with so much slaughter. I don't know how a European could believe people are basically good. It is the silliest belief a human being can have, in my opinion. The silliest, the single stupidest belief you can have is that human nature is good. I don't say it's evil. I think it's a mixed bag, but it isn't good. Who was I with? Oh, yes, I was with a Bulgarian woman on the ship that I had with my listeners, my Rhine trip just now. So I said, how are things in Bulgaria? I have affection for Bulgaria. So I have a special affection for Bulgaria. I like the people, and Bulgaria saved its Jews. So I have, and nobody knows it. So I just have an affection. Anyway, I said, how are things in Bulgaria? And I speak Russian, so when I was in Bulgaria, I always got along easily with people. And so she said, things are really difficult economically. And I knew it because they'd sent no one to Eurovision. Only Ukraine and Bulgaria sent no delegations to the Eurovision. Ukraine was political and Bulgaria was economic. They literally didn't have the money to make an act at Eurovision. So I said, let me guess why things are so bad in Bulgaria. Corruption, correct? And she said, exactly. Corruption is the reason that almost any country is poor, Africa or Europe or anywhere. And so what is corruption? It's organized stealing. But if people are basically good, why is there so much of it? It's a big problem. How you make good people is the most important question you can ask, and the left doesn't ask it. The left asks, how do you fight institutional racism and sexism and so on? I ask, how do you make good people? And the answer is, everyone must fight his nature. You must raise children to fight their nature. That's the religious answer. It is the best answer.
Time has... I'm really sorry because time has really gone, and our guests have to be in other commitments, and Dennis has to travel to Amsterdam. So I want to thank you all for participating. I'm sorry we didn't have more time for questions. As a moderator and as the organizer, the only thing I wanted to say, Dennis, is, other than thank you, obviously, which I thank you already, is to say that you spoke of Western civilization and the difference between the European and the American way. I think, I personally think that both in Europe and in America, different people exist, and some believe in Judeo-Christian values and some don't. People like me, who are very European and never lived anywhere else other than Europe, that have the same Judeo-Christian values that you have. As you can see, we want to build the same future, which is one of freedom for everyone. And so I think sometimes we compare things which is like, you have to compare like for like, basically. That was my point. So, and the only last thing I want to say is that Western civilization was based on Judeo-Christian values, and without them, we could not have the freedom that we obtained. So that is what I base my belief in. Thank you again for coming. I want to thank once again our panel and also our host. We really have gone out of...
There are unanswered questions.
Okay, we really have...
Do you allow me
yes, 1 minute?
1 minute, please.
So we're going to hear from the State Secretary and then straight to our host, who's just going to give our final remarks. Thank you. Yes.
Just two remarks to the lady who asked on the migration and said that people are coming to Europe who are not sharing our values. And first, they should accept our values, and then we can talk about their values. Now, the problem is that this is, though in a certain sense, true, but the problem is that nobody has decided in Europe about the real question, and the real question is that these people should not be let in. It's not the question that, that they should accept what we are saying to them, because it's not even very democratic. The question is that we should stop this flow of illegal migration, which has no democratic legitimation. Nobody has decided upon this, not the prime ministers, not the head of states. I think this is the problem, and as long as we do not stop it, and as long as the so-called Willkommenskultur of the German Chancellor is reigning Europe, I think we are pretty much in trouble. The gentleman asked me on acts of anti-Semitism not condemned in Western Europe, but very much condemned in Eastern Europe. double standard. I cannot. That's it. I mean, we have a functioning legal system. We have functioning laws, and the Hungarian police and the Hungarian authorities are very tough on people who are acting against Jewish compatriots. And the last remark, and that's really last, and it's rather in joke, about the drinking habits of the Scandinavians. I'm happy that you raised it because I was ambassador in Helsinki 2 years, and the Finns have horrible drinking habits. I'm sorry about that if there are Finns here. I love the Finns, but their drinking habits are really pretty much outrageous. So I have an idea here that probably the reason why everybody thinks that the Scandinavians are that happy is that they drink a lot. Because drinking makes you happy. Could that be, because all the statistics, they are leading all the statistics in happiness in Europe, the Danes, the Swedes, the Finns, and they are changing each other. But there you have, in these countries, especially in Finland, you have the highest rate of suicide in Western Europe. So how does it come together? That's not very convincing. So I'm afraid that there's a famous saying that I believe the statistics that I force myself. I think these statistics are being produced by the Scandinavians, most probably. That's what I can, but once again, and for the camera, I love the Scandinavians and I love the Finns as well. And I was also accredited to Estonia, and Estonia is a very special country in many senses. So thank you very much again for the opportunity.
Dear friends, this is the real end, and I want to make the end by stressing this thought. Mr. Prager said, and I think we need to take this home, Europe is under an experiment. Will it keep its values if it denies God? Its values spread out from the Bible. Is it possible to keep them functioning if Bible we don't want to take seriously? And this is the truth of the atmosphere of European Parliament, I have to say, out of my experience. I hope that this experiment would not be successful, and we need to bring the change. So thank you very much to all of you. Thank you to all of our panelists and speakers, and may God bless Europe. Amen? Absolutely. Amen.